As you see, that was cycle geometry. Great first half. Bar exposed right now. Maybe open after the show. There's high pieces on the second half. We're going to start with bivoulab. Okay, David Cox and Molly Hankwitz right here. Come on, let's hear it. Bivoulab. Do you have anything to say about your project?
Well, are we
going right into it, or are you going to
Do
say
you have
something?
anything to say about your project?
It's an investigation of San Francisco as seen through the eyes of mainstream Hollywood movies. San Francisco as a character, itself a character.
Thanks very much. Here we go.
Okay.
That was it. All right.
Yes,
So,
sir.
welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have time to go through about 9 films with you. We're going to take you on a psychogeographic tour of the city of San Francisco. And our main theme in this particular research project, which was part 2 of the Cine Francisco project, is toxic, the toxic city. The city is a toxic element or being invaded by some sort of toxic or invasive force from the outside. So there's 5 things we want you to keep in mind as we show you the clips and talk about the films. David and I are really into film noir. We watch a lot of film noir and look over them. And some of these films, the earlier ones, are coming out of that film noir route. So first of all is the precarious protagonist. Usually a male figure who is in some way in a precarious situation. Either caught in living on the edge, living in numerous worlds at one time, touching corruption, trying to remain moral, or is in a film noir sort of bipolarity with masculinity and femininity. Second one, the rootless persona, the itinerant character. Could be an immigrant, could be a foreigner of some kind, gay, eccentric, footloose, cosmopolitan figure who's without roots. Could be the post-war male who's sort of getting out of jail or has one bag and hitchhikes around the... Go ahead. Go back, sorry. So the family as protagonist, always a favorite, especially in Hollywood film. The nuclear family, and more recently sort of the multicultural nuclear family, pitted against a backdrop of some kind of city or place in which they are torn in some way, partly part of the destructive aspect and also part of creation myths that are embedded in the films. The next one, toxic youth culture. So here is the youth culture, not seen necessarily as a positive force, but as some kind of sort of alien universe in which the youth are somewhat toxic to the status quo. And similarly, in counterculture as threat, the reworking of the counterculture after the 60s, especially in some reactionary 70s films, in which the counterculture has been rewritten as a kind of negative post-Charles Manson, post-Kennedy assassination sort of force within San Francisco. It's no longer that the hippies are free and peaceful. They've been transformed. So these are the films we're going to look at. We're very interested in the topic of the counterculture, especially in looking at stereotypes of that. Psych Out, Multi-Stalking, DOA, The Conversation, Crackers, Ask Me, Don't Tell Me, Dirty Harry, San Andreas, and, we may put Godzilla in if we have time. Okay, so the first film, Psych Out, made in 1968, is a tour through the Haight-Ashbury. A deaf young woman in search of the summer of love, a little bit after it happened, arrives in the Haight-Ashbury and has sort of the experience of melding with the city and melding with the hippies. David, do you want to say more?
Yeah, this film was made by Dick Clark Productions, a mainstream sort of maker of sort of exploitation productions from the counterculture, and it shows it was sort of it's an unintended documentary really of the Haight-Ashbury not long after the Summer of Love. It doesn't really show the Summer of Love, but a kind of exploitation reenactment of that period not long after. So a young woman, a deaf young woman, is going to look for her long lost brother who's fallen victim to STP, which was an actual dangerous drug, similar, they're sort of synthetic alternative to LSD.
Right, so the film functions kind of as when we talk about toxicity, it's actually about a toxic agent, STP, that was a threat to those interested in taking drugs. And so, it acts almost like a PSA, but it's a Hollywood film in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, on one level, it was sending out a warning to hippies not to take STP, but it was also kind of shamelessly using that as a fig leaf of propriety, as a way to enable the straights to enjoy the vacarity of the Haight-Ashbury scene in its last days. It should be said, because it wasn't long after this that the whole place sort of caved in and became victim to crackdowns, and the whole economy of the Haight-Ashbury was based on displacement. The suburban white kids had displaced the African Americans who'd lived there, and pretty soon they were going to get swept out by even more ambitious gentrifiers, which has happened ever since.
Okay, we're going to the next one?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of this film we could show you, but it's been kind of the inspiration for some of the other research. So The Maltese Falcon, obviously, is a really famous film that was made here, and Dashiell Hammett wrote the screenplay. And there's a tour you can take in the city where you go from location to location. At the center of it is this black bird who really is part of the toxicity of the city itself. It's the value, the thing that gets fought over for profit, and also kind of matches Mary Astor's role as the demonic film noir heroine. But anyway, Humphrey Bogart plays, and here we have this great opening scene with the Oakland Bay Bridge. Humphrey Bogart and Sam Spade, you can see they locate his office in the early 1940s Embarcadero before all the skyscrapers were built down there. And you can see him in this, it's the legal and financial district of the city.
What's interesting is that it's a cardboard sort of plywood model just outside his office that was made on the set, but it's quite a nice little model.
Go back to where he enters. The hotel, yeah.
So, yeah, this is the Belvedere.
So this is was filmed a location in a hotel in San Francisco that's no longer there, but he walks in and he goes straight to the telephone and makes a phone call. Here we have the public lobby of the hotel. And the telephone, we're talking about modernity, is the modern symbol at this point. After World War I, and this film was like 44, or after World War II, the telephony came in, and long-distance telephones were used much more in the United States, and gave rise to a professional class of people who could speak, in non-geographic zones, call from city to city. So first of all, one character is named Cairo. Then he asks him about this guy from New York, and they're all strangers. They've never met each other before. So it's this very alienated world in which no one really knows anybody, but they're making geographic leaps.
And Bogart is having some help from the floor security to kick this bum out. And, along with Joel Cairo and Mr. Gutman and all the others in the search for the Maltese Falcon, the Gunzel, as he's called, the gunslinger, is escorted out of the building. So here's the toxic element that Bogart and his class are there to protect. The Belvedere is the nice place. We don't want this scum around here from Europe.
Right, so he's kind of a moral figure, a figure who's hanging on the edge of morality, trying to move corruption out of the city. He lives, he has to kind of dabble in it and try to preserve his own morality at the same time. But the film goes on to bring in, a whole range of eccentrics, Sidney Greenstreet and so forth, who are foreign and kind of foppish and eccentric, another toxic element.
In Dead on Arrival, our main character, played by Edmund O'Brien, has been poisoned by a lethal dose of barium slipped to him as a Mickey Finn in a Embarcadero nightclub called The Fisherman, a jive club. And had he not gone to this wrong side of town, he would be just fine. Instead, he had to go on holiday in San Francisco to get away from his clingy girlfriend in the Central Valley, and so he paid the price.
Right.
He spends the whole film tracking down his killers because he's now a victim of his own homicide. And it's an excellent film. It entered the public domain not long ago. And we have some classic scenes of San Francisco. This film was filmed in San Francisco,
right,
including some classic shots of the St. Francis hotel, which is of course still there and still used. When he joins his salesman friends to go to this jive club, he's not sure what he thinks about jive, but it's obvious that he's
kind of experimenting and going a bit down into the wrong side of town or the underground and hear some kind of newfangled music. It's not really his world.
But this is an early glimpse at the then quite real and nascent beatnik scene, which is, the literary movement, the lifestyle movement that led to most of the other post-war countercultures in the Bay Area. The fusing of African American culture and sort of downscale.
And White's kind of trying it on.
Literary,
White's kind of trying it on. And it's here where he slipped the poison that is going to do him in, implying a kind of, maybe slightly racist narrative that there's a toxicity in that environment in some way.
So he's feeling bad. He gets on a cable car outside the St. Francis and
goes the wrong way.
Goes the wrong way, but it doesn't matter. He jumps on Powell Street tram.
No one not from here would know this.
And then he gets off further up.
Coming up the hill.
Which is cool.
That's California and Powell, where the two trolleys cross there, and he goes to see the doctor. This is where he finds out that he's actually ingested something that's going to kill him.
And this location is still there. If you look at the settings, it's still there. That's the fisherman place in Embarcadero now, in more or less the same location. And that's the St. Francis then and St. Francis now. Not much has changed really. So he goes to find out what's up, and the doctors tell him he's been poisoned. He doesn't really believe it at first, so he goes and has a second opinion, and the doctor shows him the barium glowing in the dark. So then in a mad frenzy, he leaves this hospital.
Goes to the Southern Pacific Hospital on
Fell Street, and then race with a lovely soft wipe about now. He's now in Market Street, and this was done surreptitiously without a permit, with Edmund O'Brien actually bumping into unsuspecting.
So those aren't extras; they're actually people who don't know why this guy. Who don't know why this guy is running madly down Market Street.
And if you were told that you had like 3 days to live because you'd ingested barium, you'd probably run madly down Market Street also. And so now he's roughly around the old Navy area and the old Virgin Megastore area, and and then another soft dissolve, and he's back in the Embarcadero again.
Yeah, somehow he ran from there to there.
And he collapses outside a newsstand, the good old newsstand, always an intersection of major foot traffic.
He's coming to terms with the reality. He looks up and he's blinded by the sun. And he's become an outsider in his own world. Like he no longer really exists. So he just kind of is an onlooker, living vicariously with the innocence of children he could have had, the relationships he could have had. He's going to die. So he's witnessing the life he could vicariously living.
As Zizek would say about most of us under capitalism, he's forced to live as if he were free.
Yeah.
But this only steals his determination, and he then goes off to look for his killers. The Conversation by Francis Coppola, 1973, views the city at different scales. Time and space are literally cut up at both diegetic and non-diegetic levels simultaneously. There's a direct reference, of course, to Antonioni's blow-up here, for recorded evidence forever more opaque and elusive meaning.
So, what really, this is a great opening shot of Union Square, and it's before it's been redesigned, and it was redesigned. What's interesting about this film and what the infecting, you can guess maybe before I even say it, the infecting element here is the introduction of surveillance technologies, for example, into the city to such an extent that a public square like this, which was meant for as a symbolic place, perhaps of like the green in New England towns, to be some kind of democratic ideal where all kinds of people can hang out and enjoy public spaces. You know, its public aspect has been completely invaded by this private element. These two people go there to try to have an anonymous conversation and end up being completely recorded by this expert sound team. So it's sort of about the privatization of the public realm early on in the 70s, when there was a lot of building in the city going on, a lot of corporatization of San Francisco at that time. They're getting recorded, their whole entire conversation will be overheard, or as they think that they've gone there to blend in and not be heard because it's a public area. And it's also a great shot too. We noticed in a lot of the 70s films we're looking at that the introduction of aerial shots is really prominent. Aerial shots, shots from rooftops, shots from helicopters. Now, of course, like with drones, you see tons of aerial shots, but there's a lot of shots in this film and in the Dirty Harry film we're going to look at that are off of rooftops of quite high buildings.
In this sequence, Harry Cole is editing together 4 separate recordings of the conversation in Union Square. And then he uses a device to clear up one section of the conversation, which reveals a very important phrase, which is, he'd kill us if he had the chance.
So he gets he gets into the plot of what they're talking about. But he's also viewed, if you think about San Francisco, the city, he's a techno-scientist, like he's an innovator completely. He's got this amazing studio at 16th and Folsom in the light industry building. He's got all this state-of-the-art equipment. He's not just a sound, you know, he's not just a surveillance guy, you know. He's really an artist.
We learned that he's built all of his own equipment, that he's a top expert in his field, but he's racked by a terrible guilt about the consequences of his work. And it turns out that he is indeed complicit in a great crime, a corporate crime.
Right. So, and his client is really this really privatized, you know, it's sort of about the presence of private capital moving in on San Francisco and its immoral effects on innocent people.
The toxic effects of
privatization
and the deep state
on innocent people. Yeah. He's another protagonist who's kind of caught in a moral dilemma.
And in a sense, the top-down gaze of the man on his team who's using a directional mic that looks like a rifle is similar to that used by Scorpio in Dirty Harry.
There's Dirty Harry on top of 555 California. We
can even say that the conversation is really a comment by Coppola and his team on a kind of structure of the comment on assemblage, using assemblage, which is a great Bay Area tradition.
Here he is he's always really shot with all this great equipment. He's a total, you know, artist at what he's doing.
He's a gear nerd.
Yeah, gear.
Okay, so this is Crackers. It's kind of a goofball fast comedy made by Louis Malle in 1984. And you can see the tensions in the Mission District around in 24th Street in this film even then. The opening scene is set on 24th Street. Around the York and 24th and Alabama. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that.
So what we're going to show you, the clip we're going to show you is pretty much all shot. It goes from North Beach here, or you know, not North. Sorry, it cuts from here into the Mission on 24th Street, or the city. He's fascinated with the street, but as you might expect from Louis Malle, he creates a lot of stereotypes of street people. At the same time, there's a lot of wonderful shots of the Mission. You can see on 24th Street the trees are all very young and they've just been planted, or they're very small, but now they're really huge. And some familiar buildings and storefronts. It takes place as a kind of patter amongst about 10 or 12 street people who know each other in this one small area of the Mission. You know, but again, the city is, you know, this area of the city is kind of seen as infectious itself. It's got this poor, it's treated as having this poor street population that's not quite right or slightly on the make. There's a hooker who's a single mother. There's a meter maid who's, you know, kind of a working woman as well. This year she rocks up in her little. They still use those carts back in 1984, and the prostitute is behind her.
And most of the action takes place around a second-hand store, which is now a butcher shop next to a bodega on 24th, near corner of York Street. So if you look in the background there, where she walks into, that's now a butcher store.
It's directly across from where Modern Times bookstore's been for the last 6 or 8 years when it moved over there.
Yeah. So she, what
It's a great car, that thin pink Cadillac without the wheels. Notice it's been stripped. It's the urban ghetto. You know, the Mission is the ghetto. It's been all its tires have been taken off and everything.
What you see behind her is what up until recently was Modern Times bookstore.
Right.
This is now a butcher here where they are.
And for some reason, Donald Sutherland is in this film. Seems really oddly cast, but anyway. And Sean Penn is a really young punk there in the red shirt.
Yeah. So this is Ask Me, Don't Tell Me, which is a kind of PSA, a well-intentioned film. Really, the essential message of it is sort of keep the gangs off the street, keep them busy.
If only we could do something for our youth. So it's kind of about the youth just not having much to do, and what can we do for them.
It's not, it's kind of a liberal universalist interpretation of the youth kind of being out of control and needing some guidance.
Yeah. Or the youth itself are kind of the toxic here. They're the kind of the other to the dominant voice of the film, which is like get them some jobs. There's like Castro Theater there and the old Castro Grill. But they're mostly seen hanging on the street in groups and not having much to do.
We're invited to interpret the hanging out on the street as very sort of transgressive. It's not seen as inherently part of a culture of its own. It's beyond the pale. It's something that should be cleaned up.
Cleaned up. They're not really doing much of anything but that. Certainly it's not a culture. That's very valuable.
And in that regard, it's no different from now. Gatherings of minorities are still considered threatening to the, middle class and to the gentrifiers. So that's Ask Me, Don't Tell Me, which is, fascinating.
Sort of social documentary.
This is Dirty Harry, 1972. Clint Eastwood was not the first choice for the anti-hero. John Wayne and Steve McQueen were offered the role, but turned it down.
It's really kind of a Republican rewriting of the 60s, though, because Dirty Harry, David, can you just leave it on one slide?
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood is Mr. Handgun, Mr. I should own a handgun permanently and forever, advertisement for lack of gun control. And the sniper, too, has a pretty high-powered rifle he got from somewhere. But he's the kind of post-Manson character here. He's got wild hair. He wears paisley ties. You can see over there. I did bring a pointer. He's got, a kind of crazed grin like Charles Manson. I'd say he's very influenced by that character. And the paisley tie, which means he was once part of a counterculture or has been in the 70s kind of trimmed down paisleys. But here we have this rugged individual, Republican-type cop who is above all authority and who is, he defies his boss all the time just to go out and kind of clean up the city with his handgun. Although he's a very sensitive guy and dates very beautiful women and is a real sweetheart. When he's on the job, he's Mr. Rugged Individual.
So his name's Scorpio.
Scorpio is the killer, dude.
Which is a reference to the Zodiac Killer.
Right. The first murder we see is this. It took place in the Holiday Inn pool, which is now the Hilton Hotel in Chinatown, and he's on 555 California with this groovy top that's kind of a folded paper kind of model there. And he's a sniper. It's like, I think it's really influenced too by the Kennedy assassination. I mean, when have we not seen like that aerial kind of above ground, grassy knoll inflected sniper? So Clint goes up there to check out the crime scene. He doesn't really walk, we decided. He kind of drifts or floats along.
Then he goes to the next building to see where the
yeah, he's scoping out. This is, of course, the Bay Bridge, and that's the. Look at all the piers. There weren't quite so many over there before. Now there's, I mean, there were a lot. Now there are none. There's so.
But the Scorpio character is framed as a kind of leftover from the counterculture,
Who's going to rise?
and the counterculture
Wild, insane.
the counterculture represents a sort of a loss in the equilibrium that has to be counteracted.
Counteracted by somebody like Clint, right?
Yeah, so he's a stabilizing force for a San Francisco that's gone too far.
Right. And, you know, so he's up top looking down at what's going on
Yeah,
below.
and he's quite sadistic. He'll murder people just on a whim.
Right, it's a pretty amazing, the police brutality that goes on in this film. Like, he just is, I mean, you see it all the time if you watch any television at all, too. It's just incredible what cops get away with in movies and on. It's just completely illegal, everything they do.
There's even an
killing.
oblique reference to the Merry Pranksters in that the crazed Manson style.
Yeah, this
stuff,
guy takes over a school bus, you know. It's kind of the Green Tortoise, Merry Prankster reference, we think, in this countercultural guy who's now an insane psychopath. The whole counterculture wrapped up just in his personae alone, which is what I meant before about the Republican sort of rewriting of the counterculture.
Yeah,
Because these are types that are getting embellished onto your brain, you know, as this wacko hippie, wacko hippie, wacko killer hippie.
This little stray kid doesn't obey him, and so he belts him.
Yeah, it's pretty abusive, and you know, of course,
So
really different from Clint.
this is what could have happened if the hippies had taken over.
Right. You would have ended up like this. You would have ended up in a precarious bus driving to nowhere with like the magic school bus. You know? Really.
So they do what any crazed hippie would do: is they drive to Larkspur.
Right, and get a hot tub in a 2-car garage. Okay. So it's pretty horrendous.
So the next film
Next to the last film,
is
San Andreas. We moved to 2015.
what happens when wealthy people find that even economic downturn can't prevent the crumbling of the very fabric around them.
When wealthy people try to experience the street, this really upscale and rich young friends from a really, the San Andreas fault's gone off. It's the big one, right? The big one. It's really horrendous. And here they are with experiencing all the turmoil and suffering of being street kids suddenly. Like they're turned out, they have no home, this world is falling apart around them. All they have is each other. Oh my God, and you know, the tableau is this completely disintegrating San Francisco in the background. Everything's just crumbling around them. The more they hang out, the more it crumbles. The more they sit in the street, the more it crumbles. Just this absolutely Armageddon biblical
You see what
destruction.
See what Obamacare leads to?
Yeah, right. What if you went in the street? This definitely would happen. It definitely would happen if you were attracted to each other. And then, yes, the whole place is folding up around
And in the film, the premise for the destruction of the city is the
divorced parents looking for their daughter. And then they're splitting up. They're splitting up. Oakland Bay Bridge again. Look, they really didn't get it right. It's 2015. I think it's been redesigned. You can see AT&T Park is just the tectonic plates of the urban landscape are completely just buckling. Obviously, you should never take up life in a city. Ever. It's a dangerous place. Dangerous, dangerous. For some reason, the parents who are in search for their daughter, of course, the only real heroic act is to protect your child. They get a speedboat, and then it seems to be like a pleasure traveling. This is kind of, they're kind of getting together over the search for their daughter.
Yeah, it's all about the fact that they're falling apart as a family. So
they're falling apart as a family, but they're coming back together because of this disaster. So you get to live it with them.
And globalization is sort of paying back in the form of a container ship, which
Right.
comes over the tidalway.
Right, they can almost get nailed by this tank, this container ship. Here comes the global other. Ah, it's gonna crush them.
Or it could be it could be a reference to erectile dysfunction.
Right, erectile dysfunction. We couldn't figure it out. But they could be on vacation in Florida with a different backdrop, you know. So they go after their daughter to go find her.
So finally the family gets reunited, and
Yeah.
that's when all the destruction finally stops.
Right, is when, in the end, show the last peaceful shot, because it really reminds me of the story by Michael Kohlhaas, this German writer from, I think he's 17th century, where this earthquake happens and the whole town tries to go to higher ground, and they all end up having an orgy. It's hilarious story if you ever get a chance to read it. And Michael Kohlhaas, and in the end, they are reunited, and the destruction sort of passes out. Of, you know, the earth stops heaving. The earth has ceased to heave, and it's kind of peace again. Peace again. All right, there you go. And the sun is setting, and everything's a-okay.
So, as Slavoj Žižek has said, we can imagine the end of the world, but we can't imagine the end of capitalism.
It's the family. Okay. Are we going to give them any guidelines?
No, I think. Well, can we? Oh, why
That's
not?
great.
Okay, Craig, can we show some Godzilla?
One more. This is our sequel, prequel.
Yeah. So at our next show, we'll be talking more about
The counterculture.
the counterculture generally, but that's to be announced.
Right.
It's a brief view of Godzilla on the Golden Gate Bridge.
This is your classic alien monster, you know, science fiction kind of invading communism, invading the city in the form of an alien
And they're all
monster.
going into the BART station.
Right? Like 50s sci-fi, giant ants and Godzillas. All right. You do.
Thank you very much.